No, we ended up with 2 forum chats, 2 different registrations, people struggling to get on last time. So we've actually switched the format. We also, because what we're trying to do is respond to the various questions that ERSA Forum members had asked, that we've pre-submitted these to Nick at the DWP. I've made some very rough and ready slides first thing this morning so that you can see on the screen the questions that were asked. And I think we are just letting the last few people in, Nick. So can you just bear with us and then we'll make a start.
That's totally fine, Elizabeth. I've got 1 or 2 things I might just say before we kick off.
Yeah,
but let's wait
do you want to start with that, Nick? We'll go.
I can, or we can wait for colleagues to join, Elizabeth. I don't mind.
I think we've probably got everybody in now. So yeah, let's go for it.
All right, let's go for it. So hi everyone. There's a couple of faces I don't think I do recognise actually from previous ERSA events, but just for colleagues who I haven't met before. Hi, it's great to be here. I'm Nick Riddle. I was director for delivery of the Kickstart scheme. I guess I still am. At the moment, I've also moved across to be director for all of our services in Central England. So it's great to be here with you all today. Great to have the conversation. As usual, Elizabeth, I've just got a couple of things I say, which I kind of reflected on just this morning, because I think this is probably the first time I've been with you since the scheme closed for new starts, because I think last time, Elizabeth, you might have had Cotty and other colleagues from policy. So just a couple of things from me before we spin on with the questions. I think the first is just to say an absolute massive and heartfelt thank you to everybody that is on this call. I still remember, some of you were there and some of you weren't. I still remember my first ERSA meeting, which I think was probably back in September 20, was it, Elizabeth?
Something it was like indeed, that, wasn't it? Yes. Yeah.
20. It was an interesting 2.5 hours of my life, I've got to say. But there were 2 things that I sort of took from that meeting. The first was an intense sense of frustration from the community about how things were going. I think we just have to recognise that straight away. But the second thing that I also picked up from that meeting was, I think, an equally intense sense of passion and desire to do the right thing for our young people. And I know that the frustration came from a good place and came from wanting to do the right thing. And I know everyone around this table and everyone at DWP has wanted to make this work. And I think if we reflect, you absolutely have made this work. You probably don't need me to tell you this, but we've now got more than 162,000 young people who have been through the Kickstart scheme. And without all of you on this call, that just wouldn't have happened. Those young people that walked into our job centres would not have walked out with the life-changing opportunities that they've had. I don't know if we've got colleagues from East Midlands Chamber of Commerce on. We might have, we might not, but I still remember one of our first Kickstart starters who was a young man from Derby, and I remember his mum had taken a picture of him in his garden, standing there proud as punch on his first day in his new job. And without all of you, that just would not have happened. Way back in the early days, I used to approve all of the Kickstart jobs. It was actually, although it was a mammoth task, it was one of the parts of my job that I enjoyed the most. And I still remember the massive diversity of jobs that you guys brought to the table, principally through the Gateway scheme. I know that some of you might be direct employers, but I'm probably also talking to you guys too. But particularly through the gateways, some of the best jobs I've ever seen. I remember some jobs down in the Donkey Sanctuary in Devon. I remember an assistant river keeper on the River Wye. I remember jobs with the canal and River Trust. I remember so many of them. And what that meant was a young person that walked into one of my job centres, either in Central England or anywhere across the UK, who walked in thinking, I'm just going to walk out with any job, actually probably walked out in many cases with the jobs of their dreams. And that is something that you guys have provided. What I always used to say to my guys in DWP when we were having pretty rough times, and we have had a few rough times, as colleagues will know, is that I firmly believe that in 10, 15 years time, we will see someone in the media and they'll ask where their journey started. And I think at least some of those people will say scheme. Started with this gateway, started with that organisation. So it is an absolute heartfelt thanks to everybody on this call. I know we've got Carly out there as well, who's my deputy director. I don't think I can really let the forum go without saying that I know that everyone on this call knows too how much work the DWP has put into this process as well. But I have to say, all of that work would have been for nothing if it hadn't been for you guys sticking with us and bringing forward those absolutely amazing jobs. I know we've got questions coming up, Elizabeth, but I guess my final thing, even though it might be answered in the questions, is that DWP hasn't switched off from this. So although I've moved a little bit sideways, I still care passionately about Kickstart. I'm still here as director for the scheme overall. We've got Carly Blaine, my deputy director, who's also still full-time. We've not finished, as far as I'm concerned, a young person who started their Kickstart placement on the 1st of April 2022 is just as important as a young person that started on the 1st of January, 1st of March last year. If I was a young person now in a Kickstart placement, I'd still want to get exactly the same level of service as if I was one of the first going through. So we've not forgotten about you. So that was all I wanted to say, Elizabeth. I'm happy to crack on.
Okay, thank you. So we'll take the questions in the order we've put them on the slides so that people can see what's been asked. And Nick, I'm just going to click through and over to you. Do you want me to read out the question, or should we just have it? Yeah. Okay.
No, I'm fine for that. And thank you, by the way, Elizabeth, for putting the questions in advance, and colleagues for doing that. Hopefully, it means that the answers I give will be a little bit more coherent. I'm obviously happy, as always, Elizabeth, to take any follow-on questions as we go. So, first one was, is there a dedicated national DWP contact for financial queries? And I actually think the person who asked the question quoted a particular email address and a particular individual within DWP, probably because I guess that person hopefully has been helpful in the past. But just to be clear, that person is not the sole, I guess, portal for payment inquiries within DWP at the moment. As I said earlier, we have not switched off. We're still there, although we have much smaller teams now. Our payments team will be certainly the last team standing because we've still got all the payments to make until final scheme closure. So that team is still very much up and running and operational. For a bit of clarity, the payments team actually has 4 email inboxes. I'm only going to give you one, and the reason for that is because if they need to get in touch with you once that inquiry is triaged and goes somewhere else, then it might come from another email inbox within DWP. But hopefully colleagues have got a pen and paper or something along those lines. So if you need to contact the DWP payments inquiry team, we've just got the one email address for inquiries. Where we've written out with a specific business and we need a more targeted email address, as I say, we might come back to another one. But the main email address that you guys need to get in touch with if you've got a payments inquiry is Kickstart, which is spelled as it would be, kickstart.payment inquiries, which is all one word and all lowercase, at dwp.gov.uk. So that just one more time. So it was kickstart.payment inquiries at dwp.gov.uk. That good, Elizabeth?
Thank you.
Right. So this is a really, really interesting question. So I can understand completely, I guess, where this one has come from. Colleagues will know that we do, within the terms of the grant agreement, have the authority to commission, if you like, audits of how the money has been spent. There's only been a couple of situations where I remember that having happened in my tenure, and they were when we'd had particular complex cases where something had gone wrong. So although we have the right to do this, at the moment, we don't have a commissioned plan to do it. So we will, I think, have within, as in internally within DWP, I guess a formal evaluation once we finish the scheme. And by formal evaluation, I don't mean the evaluation of the effectiveness, but I mean an exercise about where or if we go any further with Kickstart. So at the moment, Elizabeth, the best answer I can give colleagues on the call is that we don't have any plans to commission these at the moment, but colleagues will know that under the terms of the grant agreement, DWP has the right to do so within, I think, about 6 years of the signing of the grant agreement. I don't envisage, colleagues, just to be clear, that we're going to come back in 5.5 years and say that we're going to do this. If we are going to do it, I think we would probably do it much earlier than that. But at the moment, we don't have any plans to do this.
Okay, thank you.
Right, yeah. So again, I think, Elizabeth, I could be wrong. I think this is probably related to the last question, if you see what I mean, because I think there's two things running in tandem here for me. The first is an overpayment, and the second is clawing back what we might call misspent funds. So in the case of an overpayment, the Kickstart payments team will just be in touch if that reimbursement is required. Typically, just to give colleagues a bit of an example about how this might work, where we normally see overpayments being recouped tends to be where a start has been declared, we've paid the startup payment, we check the RTI feed, I think at D plus 42 or something like that, and we have no RTI feed, and ultimately it transpires once we contact the gateway or the employer that the young person hasn't actually formally started. In that situation, then sometimes we do take the money back, but that's a specific process, and as colleagues might have experienced that, you might not, you may still, but in the event of us clawing money back, my reading of that question is where we might have decided that there's been an event of default under the grant agreement, and in essence that the funds have been misspent. And in that case, Elizabeth, I think it does go back to the question we've just had about Kickstart scheme audits. But just touching on some of the other things, if the money's been passed on to an employer by a gateway, then I'm afraid DWP's agreement is with the gateway. So that is a conversation that we would have with you. Within, I think, the terms of the gateway grant agreement, there's a requirement for gateways to have similar agreements downstream with employers, but ultimately it's a gateway's responsibility. So that's who we would have a conversation with. If the employer is no longer in business, similar, I guess, to the answer I've just given, it does remain the gateway's responsibility rather than the individual employers. The final question, Elizabeth, again, I don't know if the person who asked that is on, and I appreciate actually that the person might not necessarily want to come on and actually ask that question, but I might need a bit more information about that one, Elizabeth, because as I said, it depends if it is something to do with funds that we deem to have been misspent or an overpayment, if you see what I mean. Yeah. So it's a difficult one for me to answer, and I don't want to put a colleague on the spot who may not necessarily want to come and give details. So I don't know, Elizabeth, if you perhaps wanted to follow that one up, and I'm happy to deal with it on a personal basis with that individual, perhaps rather than have a general conversation.
Yeah, we can facilitate that.
Yes.
That discussion. Yeah, okay, thank you. We've got some hands raised.
Yeah.
I'm wondering whether we'll save them, I think, till the end.
Let's save
them. And just carry on with the questions we've got first, yeah?
Let's go.
Yeah, okay.
No is a simple answer. So I think, again, it probably comes a little bit to what I said, Elizabeth, which is, you know, we have not forgotten about the Kickstart scheme or you or our wonderful young people that are on the scheme at the moment. Some of our KDAMs have gone to deliver way to work, and some have gone back to their old jobs, but each district should have a KDAM still assigned to it. So you should know who your KDAM is. There might be some people on the call who have nationally managed accounts with DWP. If that's the case, then your National Employer and Partnership Team account manager remains your principal contact, but ultimately your KDAM should still be there. We made a decision we had the decision to make within DWP about whether we wanted to retain that presence until the end of the scheme. And as I said, given you know, a young person's experience is just as important now as it was 12 months ago, we took the decision to retain that KDAM presence. So all job centre districts should have one. As I said, some have moved on. However, if you guys are struggling with that, my first, and Elizabeth, you'll remember this, it's a bit of a tried and tested chestnut, I know, your first point of contact should be your job centre, because the job centre should have a KDAM there. If you are struggling with that, then you can email this inbox and we will help you. And the email inbox, if you've got a KDAM inquiry, as in your KDAM's disappeared, you don't know who they are, all those sorts of things, your email inbox for that is national, lowercase, .kickstart at dwp.gov.uk. So that email address, one more time, national.kickstart at dwp.gov.uk.
Okay, great, thanks. ERSA will share these email addresses later as well. Yeah. Right, thank you, Nick. So
yeah, I mean, I guess it depends a little bit on what the data is, and again, Elizabeth, and this is perhaps a slightly less sensitive question than the last one that we had. So if the colleague that asked this question, is on the call today and wants to pop their hand up, happy to have that conversation, because I think it depends on what we mean by data, if you see what I mean. I mean, our view on this, I think, is that, as colleagues on the call will know, all starts needed to have started before 31st of March, and we should have known about those by the 30th of April. So to all intents and purposes, we don't really have any more data to provide, if you see what I mean, because we are where we are. If the question around data is because there needs to be some clarification of payments or something along those particular lines, you should, again, be able to go via your KDAM. But if there's any specific individual there, I wouldn't mind picking that one up, Elizabeth, because, you know, again, we could just give an email address out about that, but I think we need just to be really clear about what data and numbers we're talking about, because as I said, as we've kind of, I guess, you know, progressed through Kickstart, and as we are now at the end from that formal perspective of starts having happened and starts being declared, I'm not really sure what data now we would provide. And in terms of how will the data be finalised, again, not quite sure I understand that question. So if the person is on, Elizabeth, let's have the question.
Yeah, I can see two hands raised, Darius and Sean. I'm not sure whether either of those are the people who raised the data question. Shall I no, to unmute and come in? If
no, this is an old hand.
Okay, all right then. Okay, well, we can pick that one up, Nick. Yeah, or if somebody wants to just email policy at ERSA now, if they don't want to speak, we can pick that one up as well. Okay.
All right, so this one is around the employer details. So yes, you will have been asked to do this. So there's nothing. So hopefully there's never anything sinister about what DWP does, but there's nothing sinister about this, colleagues. Some of you will have been contacted by DWP and our research partner IFF, and they are our evaluation contractor. I'm not sure everybody was, but that initial contact went out, I think, in about March of this year, so fairly recently. And this was a data request around employers that worked through you. We will use the data in conjunction with what we have from our Kickstart provision service, which essentially is our vacancies database. So where were they? What was the industry SIC code? All of that sort of stuff, to create, as far as possible as we can get, a list of gateway organisation employers with starts. And the simple reason that we're doing this is because we are going to be commissioning shortly the second wave of our employers evaluation survey, and that is what it's going to be used for. Our researchers are currently reviewing that data, so very many thanks to colleagues that have already provided it, and with a fair wind, we expect to start the next wave of surveys with employers in the near future. So you should be hearing from us again, but that's what that one is about, Elizabeth. And just to reassure any gateway organisations who are on the call, that I think is covered in the terms and conditions of the grant agreement, that we can do that. So it's purely for evaluation purposes.
Okay, thank you.
Again,
so, yeah, the Kickstart evaluation.
Indeed, yeah, absolutely. So again, partly, I guess we covered a little bit about that. There are going to be lots of different, I guess, threads of this one. It's possibly more a question for some of my colleagues in policy or our user research teams, but happy to cover it as far as I can. In essence, we've already been monitoring Kickstart, as you know, as we've gone, and we intend to evaluate the longer term outcomes for Kickstart participants after they've completed their 6 months placements. And we're going to do this a number of ways. So the Kickstart evaluation is going to include several large-scale surveys to capture some of the views and experiences of our participants and employers. And in essence, what we're going to be looking at there is how the experiences and outcomes from the scheme vary, examine a little bit about any of the local context, the local approaches, how that's worked. So colleagues will know that in the early days, of course, we didn't have KDAMs, we just had a central team. How has that worked? Did we get that right, if you see what I mean? And then, of course, we're going to be having a qualitative case studies as well, just to draw on and get underneath, I guess, a bit more about that data and insights. And the intention is that we'll publish the findings of that evaluation once it's complete.
Okay, thank you.
So I think, Elizabeth, this is probably, again, a similar question to the Kickstart audit question that we had earlier. So when I say I don't have much more to add, it's not that I'm being rude, and I hope the person who asked, who's on the call, doesn't take it that way. But hopefully, it's been covered by the earlier answer.
Okay, thank you.
Oh. Now this is the bit at which I make even more sometimes career limiting observations off the hoof than I normally do. I mean, I think the simple answer is I just don't know, colleagues. I mean, there are lots of support offers out there in JobCentre Plus for all of our customers, including our young people. So I think the safest thing I can say is there is no plan at the moment for us to do something like this. Who knows what will happen in the future? I think at the moment, as we've talked about in some of the earlier questions, particularly Elizabeth, the one about where some of the employer advisors and the KDAMs have gone, we are working very closely with our employer partners across the country on way to work, which is, as colleagues will know, about getting as many people into work as we can for fairly obvious reasons. So there is a lot out there in terms of support at the moment for our customers in the Job Centre, and at the moment, there aren't any plans for anything else along these lines.
Okay, thank you. I can see two hands raised, Nick. So shall we go over to
Yeah,
those?
let's do it.
Yeah, Darius, and then Darshika.
Yeah, thank you, Elizabeth, and thanks, Nick, for taking the time again. Really appreciate it. I just wanted to come back to the money side of things, because it's such a critical element as a gateway.
Yeah.
You mentioned the example of grant getting paid, and it turns out someone didn't get started.
Yeah.
To me, that seems relatively straightforward. We've got the responsibility. If we didn't check or didn't know, we paid that money. To me, that's clear on us. There's plenty of other examples where we've had requests for overpayments that, for me, are not really very clear at all.
Right.
So one that is clear is like we get a whole bunch of salary payments for someone and then we get them duplicated. Okay, clearly that's on us to know, like, we've already paid those and we shouldn't be paying those again. Another example, someone starts, this is a real example, 7th of December. They leave on the 8th of March.
Yeah.
Are they supposed to get 3 months salary, 4 months salary? How are we supposed to know? And I literally have been asking this question for 3 months. Like,
right, okay, fair enough. Yeah.
What's the trigger? Is it a month to 7th to 7th? Is it 30 days, 28 days? Like, what's the trigger for us for an additional month's salary to get paid, right? Because it's a step piece. So we're left in a situation as a gateway, then, not knowing, like, are we supposed to pay that salary or not? Is that a mistaken payment based on incorrect data, right? Of like, they've left on this day. Like, are we supposed, so that feels then, I don't know what to do. And then if someone comes back to me from the DWP and say, like, we want that money back, it's like, well, how are we supposed to know that we weren't paying it? So that's can you see this? It feels like there's a lot of grey. Some feel really clear cut, some not so much.
So have you got a sort of because there's one specific example there, Darius. Some colleagues on the call will know that our payments team continues to be led by a very amazing lady called Michelle, who's brilliant at all of this stuff and great at all the detail. So Darius, I don't know, have you got a list, my friend, of these sorts of, have you got 3 or 4? Because if you have, you should have my email address, because we've had lots of chats before.
Yeah.
If you want to punt them my way, then I will get Michelle just to give you cut and dry on these, because I'm not even going to attempt to answer them, because I worry I'll give you the wrong answer, and that wouldn't be very clever. Let's make sure that a proper expert deals with it. Just pop them through, Darius, on the email. We'll get Michelle to look at them and get back to you. And if you have any problems, just come back to me. But Michelle normally knows the answer of these in about 2 seconds. Okay,
but you can see that it's some, some are less clear cut.
I do, yeah. I mean, I know Michelle will know the answer to these. With any, there's always going to, you're right. There's always going to be some shades of grey, aren't there? But if you pop them through, Darius, the specific ones, we'll get you answers to them, no problem.
And I guess a part two is, you know, you've always been very sort of reasonable, and our experience has always been actually very healthy in terms of having genuine conversations about things. Yes. Is there a sort of formal route of appeal? Not that we feel like we need one, but like if there's a request of like, look, we want this money back, is there a formal process for resolving that?
To be honest, Darius, I think the simple answer is, well, okay, I'll give you the by the book answer, and I'll give you my answer, if you see what I mean. So within the grant agreement, there'll be provisions relating to if there's a disagreement. However, as is always the case, I'm still around, and as I said, I intend to stay around as long as DWP decide not to do something else with me for the next few months. So I guess, Darius, if you struggle, you can just come and have a conversation with me, and we'll see what we can do. I'm grateful for you saying that your interactions have been positive, and you know, we've had quite a few great conversations, all of us on this call, I know. So if you struggle, Darius, and you think, hang on, why are we being asked to give this back? We just don't think it's right. If you can't resolve it, just come and have a conversation with me.
Okay. Thank you so much. Appreciate it.
It's always a pleasure, Darius.
Thank you. Sean.
Hiya. So I suppose the clarification I'm really after in then is, are these payments a grant, or are these payments for actual expenditure? Because similarly to what Darius said, is that we've had people who have gone on sick, and within the terms of that employer, they aren't entitled to sick pay within a certain initial period of time, so they haven't reimbursed them sick pay. And I've checked with the payments team, and they've said we will continue to pay the same amount we would, the 1/6 of 6 months payment. Am I later along down the line going to get a request for that payment, the variance back, or is it a grant?
Where are you from, Sean? Remind me.
I'm from Wales Council Voluntary Action in Wales.
Okay. Sean, I'm going to take that one away. I mean, the simple answer to your question is it is a grant. The Kickstart scheme is a grant. In that scenario, so the employer, under the terms of the contract with the young person, doesn't pay sick pay.
Yes, some of them, none of their staff get sick pay for, you know, maybe the first 2 months of employment, and following that they'll be entitled to sick pay. Now, I have encouraged all employers to pay the young people regardless, because that's what they will be reimbursed. However, some of them only have 2 or 3 staff, and the existing staff seeing someone getting paid when they're not entitled to pay yet is also very difficult to manage as an employer.
I appreciate that. I mean, clearly the Kickstart is not the, you know this, I know. Kickstart is not the same as a regular employee, in inverted commas. I think there's probably there would probably be an expectation from DWP that the employer should pay it. However, I will take it away, Sean.
And I did raise it at the time, and I did have, I didn't get a straight answer. I just had an answer of, we will still reimburse you the grant payment. It wasn't a they have to pay it or not answer.
So I think there's, I'll deal with the question as simply as I can, Sean, just in the interest of time. So if we have paid you the money, and that money has not been passed on because the employer has basically said to do not give it to us, for want of a nicer expression, then I think you should expect that we would want to recover that money from you.
Oh, but yes.
There's probably a wider expectation that the employer should pay it. However, let me go and get you a chapter and verse type answer to that, if that's better.
Thank you.
Okay, thanks. Tony.
Yeah, hi both. Hi Nick, thanks. Nick, so at the very beginning of the call here, you mentioned around auditing, and there's no sort of plans at the moment for the foreseeable, but as we said, there could potentially be something changes later down the line. I seem to remember, obviously it's a long time ago, last year now, looking at the contracts, and there's something mentioned there about doing self-audits, which we do internally. But my understanding from that, maybe I've read it wrong, is we potentially get somebody from an external perspective to come and self-audit us. Is that something that we're considering, or what's your thoughts on that?
I'm having a look at the grant agreement now, actually, Tony.
Yeah. It'd be nice, because it's one of those things, isn't it? If we go sort of 2 or 3 years down the line and we want audits and stuff, it's just making sure we think we've done the right things. We've got a great audit team internally that do those pieces. It's just having that sense check for us, really, from a different perspective.
So under the terms of the grant agreement, So I'm gonna quote it if that's okay, Tony, because it's just I've got it in front of me and it's simplest. So it just says DWP may request grant appropriation will provide independent assurance that the grant has been used for delivery of the funded activities, etc. To satisfy this requirement, if reasonably requested by DWP, a report from an independent and appropriately qualified auditor certifying whether the grant paid was applied in accordance with this grant agreement. So I think the way I'm reading that, Tony, is DWP might request you to do that, but at the moment you don't need to.
I understand. Okay, so we would basically arrange that if requested by DWP.
Exactly so. I don't believe, and I know Carly's on the call and will be keeping me safe with someone. There's no requirement for you to do that now, but as I say, there is a chance that in the future we might require you to do so.
Okay, lovely. Thank you. That's answered my question. Cheers.
Pleasure, Tony. Good to hear from you. Let's keep going, Elizabeth.
Julie Duncan.
Hi, hello Nick, nice to see
Julie.
you.
You as well.
Hi, it's not really a question, it's just so much to go back to. Sorry, I'm not sure who it was who raised the issue about sick and sick pay.
Yes.
Following advice that we had, I believe, from our KDAM, we've always told employers that they must pay the sick pay. We've passed the money on to them. We've told them it's a grant.
Yeah.
We've passed the money on to them, but we've asked them to inform us of, long-going sickness issues, and we liaise with our local job centre to get the work coach involved. So that's just what we were advised to do quite a long time ago. So that's what we've done.
Okay, thanks.
Okay, so what I'm actually going to do, because you're the second person, Julie, to ask that question, obviously, I am just going to try and see, with the beauty of real-time technology, if I can get you guys an answer for that right now while we're on the call. So I don't know, Elizabeth, whether we want to move just to the next question. I'm going to very quickly tap this Teams message, but just for colleagues to know, I'm not trying to arrange my online shopping. I genuinely am trying to answer this question.
Nick, I've already put the ask in, so I'll let you know when I get it.
Oh, fab. There's Carly. So did you do that via Michelle?
Steve Curry, yeah.
Right, fine. So we might be in real time, Elizabeth, we might have an answer to that.
Perfect. Let's see what happens. Thanks, Carly. Nick,
I mean, if that decision does change from what we've done, we're in hot water because we've paid a lot of grant money out on with people that we know have been off sick.
My instinct is, Julie, that you're right, but let's just get it absolutely confirmed. But it does seem to make sense, I've got to say.
All right. Thank you very much, Nick.
Pleasure, Julie.
Okay, Nick Owen and then Amanda.
Thanks, Elizabeth, and hi, Nick, again. Good to see you.
Hi, Nick, you too.
After all this time. I'm just wondering about, I know you're going to be doing an evaluation which will be published. My concern, I suppose, is that gets stuck on the shelves and no one really kind of acknowledges it or reads it or celebrates it. And I wondered if there's any plan afoot to have some national celebration event which kind of pulls out the kind of good stories and the challenges and the kind of next steps. We're doing something like that in Leicester for our Kickstarters, which we'll invite you to, of course. But I think it would be great if we could have a national platform where everyone could, really highlight the impact of the program. I don't know if that's feasible.
I mean, something that we, as I said, something that we are definitely going to do, because I know our Secretary of State is very keen on it, because our Secretary of State, as she does with a lot of DWP matters, as you can imagine, has taken a really keen personal interest in Kickstart, given its impact. And as I say, she has personally requested that we do an internal evaluation, if you see what I mean. And that's not, I don't think, kind of a formal published thing, but I know that she will wants to do as much as she can to celebrate successes. I probably can't say any more than that at the moment, Nick, to be honest.
Is that Teresa Coffey?
It is.
Yeah. All right, brilliant, thank you.
Okay, thank you. Amanda.
Thanks very much. Nick, just going back to that sickness bit, and sorry.
Oh, you've frozen, Amanda.
Yeah.
That type of inquiry.
Just Amanda, lost you.
Oh, sorry. Okay, I'll start again, Nick.
Go on.
That's okay. Just to say, with that sickness bit, every time I had an employer that was saying that they've got a young person that might have a couple of days or whatever, I used to check with my KDAM every single time to how we should do that, and I was always advised it would be going back to the contract that they'd actually had with that young person about the sickness payment, and that's how I was, suggesting that to the employer, and every single time. But ours was only like a few days here and there. It wasn't weeks and weeks and weeks. So that was how I took that instruction, if you like. So, but also on another point with the audit stuff,
Yeah.
I put the due diligence bit in, so I've been chasing at 3 months to finish to try and get as much as possible. And I've had a couple of employers who I've struggled to get anything from. And I was told by my KDAM, as long as it's recorded, that we've chased as much as we can to get that information. That's as much as we could. But I've only got 1 or 2 that has been the struggle.
Yeah. And we've spoken before a few times, haven't we, Amanda? You've Swindon and Wilts?
Yep, absolutely.
Yep, Swindon and Wilts, I remember. Yeah. So is your concern? So just help me out again with so you were chasing employers because say my line's a bit rubbish at this end. Just ask me that one more, or just tell me that one more time if you don't mind, Amanda.
About the due diligence or about So we've chased every single employer that's had grants, etc., for their due diligence information.
Yeah.
And I've been in contact with my KDAM all the time to advise if we've had any struggles.
Yeah.
And you know, I've chased probably 10, 12, 15 times with, you know, all of them, all constantly. But I've had 1 or 2 where I've struggled to get anything from them. And my KDAM suggested that as long as it was recorded that I've chased and we've got that audit trail, that's as much as I can physically do.
Well, I mean, I would agree that it's as much as you can physically do, to be honest, but I'm not an auditor, if you see what I mean. But I would agree that it's as much as you can physically do. And I would agree that keeping records of it is probably the very, very best one, is probably the very, very best thing that you can do. I think in real time, we might have a bit of an answer to the payments issue as well. Did you want to come in, Carly? Because Carly, bless, has been desperately sending me Teams messages, and there's no way I can read them and process them at the same time. And Carly will know. Elizabeth, is it okay if we bring Carly?
Yeah, absolutely. Yes.
Come on, Carly.
So with the sick pay question, if there has been any form of payment made in the month reporting period, we would pay the full amount of the grant. So whether that was sick pay, full pay, any amount of pay, we would then release the full amount of the grant. If the sickness become long term and went on past a month, we should then be case conferencing with the employer, and we make then decisions based on the individual circumstances around that young person, taking into account if a young person is off for a whole month, they're essentially missing 1/6 of their opportunity. So we would look at those on a case-by-case basis, and I think that's possibly what was being discussed earlier around the conversations with the KDAM, and it would really then depend on the individual circumstances if it was to go beyond a month. So I hope that makes sense. So if you have got cases where young people have been off sick longer than a few days in a month, then please ensure you're having that case conference and working with us around what is the right thing to do for that young person, both from their opportunity point of view and a payment point of view. I hope that makes sense, Nick.
It does, Carly. You've prompted a couple more questions.
Yeah. Julie, have you got a follow-up, or are we moving on to Andrew?
Yeah, just that.
Julie.
Hi, sorry, can you hear me?
Yeah.
Yep, apologies. Yeah, just that does make sense, but that's not actually what we were told to do. So we were just told to sort of keep an eye on it, pass on the money, which we've done. I mean, I think a lot of our sickness was probably intermittent, so probably not a month at a time, but we may have had cases that are now closed, if you know what I mean, because obviously Kickstart's been running for some time. So I've not seen that guidance anywhere or been told that part of it, the 1 month case conference. All I was told was to sort of contact my local job centre and let them know that there was an issue, which I have done when I've been aware. And then in most cases, I've not really received any sort of response. So I'm just assuming that the work coach was contacting the young person just to try and support them.
Carly, I wonder whether it's worth us picking up with Julie outside just to make sure we've just, you know, we've been right with this. Is that okay, Julie?
Yeah, that's absolutely fine. Yes.
Okay, thanks. I know that Andrew's got his hand raised, but there's a question that somebody's raised about a young woman who's going to have a baby in June, but would like to come back and complete her Kickstart placement or job. Is that possible?
Oh, no, that's a great question. I really don't know. Carly, do you know?
So they've started and they're pregnant, and essentially they're going to have some maternity leave, and then they want to. I don't think we have the opportunity to pause placements. I'd have to take that one away as well, but we can definitely take that away and have a look at.
Okay, thanks, Carly.
What will
I'll make a note of who's asked. So
yeah, what we'll do, Elizabeth, particularly as there's 2 of us on the call, which is helpful. I will see if I can get an answer to that one while we're on the call. It's a very, very good question. So that when did the young person start then?
I don't know. I think whoever's asking this question and somebody else who's had a similar situation, I'm like relying on my phone here to see who this.
Yeah.
If they're happy to come in. They raise their hands. I'd bring them in now before Andrew. No hands been raised. Let's talk to let's bring in Andrew and we can see what we can unpick about this.
Yeah.
Erica raised her hand and lowered it. Was that about the pregnancy?
Yeah, we had the Kickstarter previously. It wasn't my question that I raised, but we had the situation previously, and we were told to support her as much as we could within placement, but it wouldn't be able to pause and resume, and we were told to end the placement at the point that she went off onto maternity, or that she left for her baby. And actually she had to leave early. She had an early labour, and so the placement ended early and she got paid for the rest of that kind of week. But we were told no pausing.
Okay, so I can see, to be fair, that Carly's asked a question of our team here as well. So Elizabeth, if we get an answer while we're on with you, we will provide it as it comes through in real time.
Right, thank you very much. Andrew Fletcher.
Thank you. Yeah, so I work for Blackpool Council. I'll be managing the gateway, and I'm just a little bit worried based on what's been said about the sickness and absence. And when we made inquiries, we were told that the payments were a grant to the value of minimum wage, national insurance, and the minimum pension contributions, and that if we received this, we should pass it on to the employer. We were also told that in the event of sickness absence, there was no expectation that the employer would pay full wages. And in fact, throughout Kickstart, we've had numerous inquiries from the finance team saying this young person's wage isn't what we expected. Could you give us a reason why? So I go to the employer. 9 times out of 10, it was sickness absence related. I would let the payments team know this, and they would then release the payment, which just it made us think we were doing the right thing, because the payment teams were releasing the payments despite the sickness absence, or lowering the wage slightly. So as I say, I'm just a little bit worried. This is the advice that we gave to our employers across the scheme. So I mean, at some point, is throughout the audits, are they then going to be expected to return those monies, or because it contradicts the advice we were given?
I see that. So what I might suggest that we do, if it's all right with you, Andrew and colleagues, is there's been a couple of questions about this one today. So I might suggest, Carly, can we ask Michelle and team just to put something in writing about exactly what should be happening in the case of sickness absence? And then Elizabeth, would you and good ERSA colleagues be able to disseminate that to this audience? And then Andrew, if that presents you with a problem, you can come back to us and we can take it from there. Would that work? Yeah, I see you put your hand back up.
Yes, just in case. I'd love to know what's happening, but obviously we're coming towards the end, so would that be retrospective, or would we then have to change what we'd done previously based on the previous advice? Obviously we can follow it going forwards.
Yeah, let's have a look at it. Let's have a look at it for you and pick it up. I don't want to give you a false answer now. I don't know, to be honest, Andrew.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, thank you. Any more hands? Yes, Darius.
So yeah, I just wanted to chime back in, and obviously I'm not speaking from any position of expertise, but I just wanted to double down on what Carly said, because I think it was really clear and actually pretty watertight. So I don't know if hearing it in a different way is helpful, but if someone gets part paid in a month, they get the whole of that grant irrespective, right, for that month. So if they've been on sick or whatever, it's just not going to be an issue for that month. So if it's a short-term sickness, there's going to be, I think, which is exactly what Carly was saying. And then if exactly what you were saying, I think, is that if there's an issue with underpay, low pay, then I'm sure, like you, we just get a contact of like, hey, the payment's less than we expected. Can you explain it? and we explain it, and then the view's taken of, okay, that's acceptable, we'll make the payment, or it's not, we won't make the payment. We've had both ways round. So maybe I'm missing what the kind of concern is, because for me it feels really clear. And we've had employers do both. We've been told our employers to pay full exactly what they're getting paid. Most of them have. One or two have just been too controversial and they haven't. And that's the view they've taken on actually paying sick pay, statutory sick pay, rather than the full pay. So sorry if I'm missing a nuance, but it seems pretty clear cut based on what Carly said, and that's our experience too. So I just wanted to add that in.
Thanks, Darius. I mean, clearly there are a couple of questions about it. So I think belt and braces. Let us just be really clear about what we should be doing in the case of sick absence. And Elizabeth, we'll put it back via ERSA if that's okay. Yeah. And if it's still not clear, Andrew, or if you or other colleagues have got, you look at it and it makes your hair go on end and think, oh my goodness me, there's something a bit awry here. Get in touch and we'll try and sort it out.
And if people want to do that via ERSA, you can always email the policy@ersa.org.uk email, because I've had a couple of messages from people who've said they were told locally something different. So I feel like we do need to get this tidied up before it's over, don't we? So that
we can. And I think if I remember rightly, Elizabeth, didn't we, about 6 or 7 months ago, I think we had a specific ERSA forum where Michelle and the team came to talk about payment.
About finance.
Yeah, it might have been a subgroup of this, but we'd be very happy to run that again. As I said, we still have a team at full strength under Michelle in payment. So if we think that would be useful, we'd be happy to do a little bit of a surgery on it, I'm sure, Elizabeth.
Okay, perfect. Yeah. Thank you for that offer. Yeah. Any more hands? Aha, every time I think they're over, we get another one. Victoria. Hiya.
Yeah, hi. I've got a situation at the moment where I've got an employer who hired a new Kickstarter on the 30th of March, and she emailed DWP to inform them of the start a week later. And what's happened now is we've all had an email from the DWP saying that the learner started too late. The trainee started too late and they won't pay. So we're in the process of fishing out all the evidence to show this girl did start before the 31st of March, but it's a bit of an uphill battle and they're not accepting much. What can we do?
I mean, Carly, let me just bring you in on that one. Do you want to see if you can give an answer to that one?
Yeah, I mean, I can take away and look at the specific case, but the legality of the grant agreement is that the young person has to have started before the 30th of March. And just because of the time period we're in, we are doing some additional checks that we perhaps haven't done throughout the duration of Kickstart, just to be really confident that that person did start. Because if that young person was to continue in a placement and an employer pay them, and then it transpired they actually started on the 1st of April, we would not be reimbursing. So we've been
actually definitely started.
Yeah.
But what's happened is we've not had any questions. We've just had an email saying we're not paying, as opposed to please can you provide evidence that she started. Now we're kind of having to backtrack and prove everything.
Definitely doesn't sound right. So if you want to ping that across to us, we will have a look. There have been some cases where either the employer has made a typo and given the wrong date in the confirmation of the start, or when we've spoken to the young person, they have also said something different. So we're having just to work through those carefully, but we are working through them with the employer and the young person just to sort of tally everything off. So that doesn't sound quite right, your experience. We can definitely look at that, and as long as we can agree that the young person started on the 30th of March, then we will make the payment.
Okay, so who do I email?
Do you want to send those ones in to me? I'm really happy to pick those up if that's all right with Nick.
It's absolutely fine, as long as you're okay with it, Carly.
Yeah, and I think Elizabeth has my contact details to share, but it's carly.blay@dwp.gov.uk.
That's great, thank you.
Yeah, and if anybody's missed that, if you send things into policy at ERSA, we'll just forward them on. Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay. Robert Varney.
Hiya. Just to share my experiences on that point, we had a starter on the 31st of March that we confirmed. I can't remember if it was on the same day or it might have even been the following day, and there were no questions at all. It was all fine. So I've not heard of that issue, and it certainly wasn't the case for us. And just going back to the previous one about the sick pay, what you just described there, Carly, we had exactly that case. So we had a Kickstarter that was off sick, I think, for 2 weeks, 1 month, and we had an inquiry from the payments team to say pay's low. Can you give us an explanation before we release the grant for this month? So you know, we told them that they've been off sick for the last 2 weeks, and they said, right, okay, that's fine, they're back at work, no problem. And then they paid it, and there was no sort of issue at all from there. So what you said, Kylie, I think that's been our experience.
Okay, thanks, Robert. Okay, we may have exhausted the hands. We would. I think what we need to do is get Eliza's back. Hi, Eliza.
Hi. Thank you so much for your time and for answering all our questions. I was just wondering if it would be possible at all to get the notes in a written form to us, to the Kickstart Gateways, you know, about the key questions mentioned in the presentation. The reason why I'm asking about this is because we've encountered many situations in the course of working on this amazing Kickstart program where we got provided with conflicting information by, you know, different QDM managers that we had, or, you know, by different teams. So since, you know, this is like, I feel like we are in this environment at the moment where there are different teams presented and there is this lively discussion. So it would be great if there was some written guidance provided post the meeting.
Yeah, sorry, Eliza, forgive me. Do you mean from this call, or sorry, just
yes,
just
from this school.
Right.
So there was some you know, key questions in the presentation, yes. And yeah, if there was some written I don't know, just written comments about each section, that would be great.
About the finance and the payments, are we talking in particular?
Well, not just finance, also about auditing and the processes, I would say. You know, even a couple of little comments, just so that if we have questions, we can turn to this information, or if we talk to our manager, there is something.
What we'd be happy to do, Elizabeth and Eliza, if that works for you guys, is you've submitted us questions in writing. We can do you some written responses, if you see what I mean. We've already, sorry, sounds a bit rude, I don't mean that in a bad way. We've already agreed on this call that we'll certainly provide something about the sick pay, and that Elizabeth, if good colleagues from ERSA would be able to facilitate that, and colleagues wanted it, then we're happy to do a little bit of a troubleshoot around payments if people have got individual issues. It's Darius, I know we've chatted, happy to answer those individual queries. As I said, I think when we ran the payments session before, I think it went quite well, Elizabeth. I think it was sorry, I don't want to put words in Ursa's mouth, but I think we managed to get through quite a lot there. So it might be that if colleagues want, we'll do something in writing, but if there's an appetite for Ursa and Ursa colleagues for a separate payment session just to troubleshoot, I'm sure we can do that.
I would take you up on that offer, because I know that people would really welcome that. But let's do the written, we'll put in the written questions, we'll get some responses, and then we'll see where we're up to.
Is that all right, Eliza? Does that work for you?
Yeah, that works very well. Thank you so much.
Okay, and thanks for raising that, and thanks, Nick. So what's this delay, isn't there, on Teams? You think that's it, and then suddenly a hand emerges. But we do seem to have exhausted it. So I'm just going to speak about some work that ERSA are doing, and then we'll see if anybody else comes in. I think that you will all have had an email from the policy team, and Henry and Erin are working on what we're going to produce as our Kickstart Stories of Success. So we are talking to people who've been in this community of good practice, talking to the gateways, and doing short interviews about their involvement with Kickstart. We're doing something where we're trying to reach out to some young people who've experienced Kickstart jobs and to some employers. We know that others will evaluate Kickstart. The DWP no doubt will be showcasing the success of it, but we wanted to just record something and to do it now before it's over, about the experience of this community, and to have something that we can put down as a marker of what we did to respond to this challenge, that will sit alongside what others do. So I know many people in the last week have got in touch with Erin and Henry. So thanks for that. Interviews will be set up. We probably need about half an hour of your time. But if you haven't already, please get in touch with us, because the more people we can get involved in that, the better. And it will be a digital resource that we put on the ERSA website, and we will share with Secretary of State, ministers, other people about our experience. Okay. Right, I think that really is it, Nick. So thank you very much to Nick and Carly. And I think we are at the end.
All right. Thanks, colleagues.
Okay. Thank you, everybody.
Take care.
Cheers,
Thank you.
Okay, bye.
Thanks, Elizabeth. Bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye. Thank you.
Bye.